Between a billion-dollar nuclear waste disposal site and a capital city that sits abandoned, governments around the world have their fair share of failed megaprojects. These projects stand out as a stain as they prove to be a drain of national resources and money. Join us as we go over the biggest megaproject failures in the world. Number 5. Ciudad Real Central Airport, Spain. The Ciudad Real Central Airport was supposed to be Spain's crown jewel, attracting travelers from all over the world. However, today the airport is home to stray animals instead of passengers. The airline first opened its doors to the public in 2009, but had to eventually close its doors 3 years later. The airport was inaugurated with high hopes of making Spain a tourist destination and solving the issue of overcrowding. With one of the longest runways in Europe and the capacity to cater to 2 million passengers a year, the airline was fully equipped to deal with high traffic. In fact, the Spanish government approved plans to expand the infrastructure and increase passenger capacity to 10 million annually. However, the project came tumbling down like a house of cards in 2012, when the company in charge of building the airport filed for bankruptcy. But the construction company alone does not carry the blame. Plans for the airport were flawed from the start. The airport was marketed as a central airline to facilitate passengers in their travels. However, the airport's location was less than ideal. Located 200 kilometers away from Madrid, the Ciudad Real Central Airport was hardly the first choice for passengers. Given the traveling time, passengers tend to avoid taking flights from the airport, which rendered the airport more or less useless, and so the government was forced to downgrade status from an international tourist hub to a single small-time airline. By 2012, the airport ended up with a $350 million debt to its name, making it a financial burden and a drain of resources. And so, it did not come as a surprise when the airport eventually ended up on an auction in 2013. However, the airline had no luck there as well and failed to attract buyers. The most people were willing to pay was $12,000, which compared to the $1.3 billion investment felt like a slap to the face. Finally, in 2019, the airline ended up in the hands of new owners who were able to make use of the space for grounded airplanes during the peak of COVID-19 pandemic. By August 2020, the airport was serving as a parking lot for 65 aircrafts, with expansion plans underway to increase the capacity to 300. However, this too proved to be a short-lived money-making opportunity, as the airport would go back to being abandoned once the pandemic was over. Given the state of the project, this next failed megaproject almost feels like a success. Number 4. Interstate H3, Hawaii. Interstate H3 is repeatedly called the most beautiful freeway in Hawaii. Stretching across 16 miles, the highway connects Pearl Harbor on Oahu's southern coast to the Marine Corps base in Hawaii on the eastern coast. It's hailed as an architectural marvel with tunnels and vaulted viaducts slicing throughout Hawaii's towering mountains, specifically in the range of Kūlālulu. However, don't fall for the highway's beauty. When the plan for the highway was first made public in 1960, local environmental groups took up arms, which is why the construction couldn't start right away. Several adjustments had to be made for the construction plan before approval. However, even with the construction underway, the project was met with serious resistance from the native Hawaiian community. Work had to be stopped numerous times given the legal troubles that surrounded the project. Funds were eventually granted for the construction of the highway in 1986, 26 years later, all thanks to Congress exempting the project from environmental laws, since it was supposed to connect to military bases. However, it ended up costing the government more than it had planned. The highway eventually opened in 1997, 37 years after the original plan was proposed, with a total cost of $1.3 billion. That's 5 times over the original estimated budget, making it the most expensive public construction project in Hawaii to date. To make it worse, the highway is deemed useless now. Initially, the highway was constructed with defense considerations in mind. However, those considerations are no longer in the picture. What's more, most native Hawaiians refuse to use the highway out of retaliation against the government for destroying many of the community's religious sites during the construction process. At the end of the day, the Interstate H3 is but a useless megaproject that cost the government a serious amount of money. But the financial loss is nothing compared to what we have next on this list has to suffer because of the abandoned capital city. Number 3. Naypyidaw, Myanmar. With an area of 7,054 kilometers, the capital city is 4 times the size of London, and yet the city presents the picture of a ghost town. The city is home to a disappointing number of 924,608 people compared to London's estimated population of 8.63 million. The city gained its status as the capital thanks to the military regime in November 2005. The decision to move capitals was put on the table after the former capital Yangon reached its infrastructural limit thanks to its bustling population of 7 million. What's more, Yangon's close proximity to the sea made it a target for invading armies. And so the foundations for this one was laid. With 20-lane highways, 100 luxury hotels, a 99-meter replica of the popular Yangon landmark, and high-end apartment complex, this cost the government a serious amount of money, $4 billion to be exact. On paper, the name itself literally means the king's residence, offered a luxurious lifestyle with multiple golf courses, shopping malls, restaurants, and a reliable infrastructure. However, locals and tourists alike seem to take little interest in the city. The highways remain completely empty, and so do the restaurants. The city's deserted streets present a puzzling question. Why are people not flocking to the dreamland? Well, it can be boiled down to a few reasons. For starters, the city lacks adequate health facilities and satisfactory educational institutions. There seems to be a scarcity of economic opportunities as well, and so the city's fate seems locked as a ghost town. However, experts are hopeful that the situation might change in the future as the country's population continues to increase, but for the time being, it still remains abandoned. Number 2. Forest City, Malaysia. The foundations of Forest City were laid with the hopes of making it a wholly integrated, futuristic city for about 700,000 residents. Plans for the project were revealed in 2006, with construction to finish in a time span of 20 years. However, as the project nears the deadline, Forest City did not inspire hope for a whole range of reasons. For starters, the project was hailed as the first ever energy efficient, low polluting, and land conserving city, but the construction ended up doing more harm than good. Man-made islands were constructed of mangrove swamps and wetlands, which ended up severely hindering the livelihood of local villagers as they lost their fishing grounds. But despite the outcry, no detailed environmental impact assessment was carried out until 2015, which is when the authorities found out that many of the regulations had been ignored. To combat the problem, the assessment proposed that the project be scaled down from 16,000 hectares to less than 405 hectares, a third of the original size. However, these measures were never implicated. To add to the long list of problems, cracks started appearing in the building soon after construction. Experts attributed the issue to rapid speed of reclamation, which gave the soil little time to settle and stabilize. That said, environmental concerns only scratch the surface. The project carries political baggage as well. For the most part, the city was funded by the Chinese, and so the Chinese were granted a free pass to the city. This invited a lot of Chinese immigrants, which is why by 2019, 80% of property owners in Forest City were predominantly Chinese, and ended up driving out the local Malaysian population who could not afford the high living cost. Given the outcry, the new prime minister was forced to ban foreigners for purchasing property in the city. Meanwhile, the pandemic ended up being the final blow in the coffin, driving away foreign investors. This created an uncertain situation for existing investors who found it best to abandon the project. Currently, the future of Future City hangs in the balance as property sales continue to dwindle, making it yet another disappointing and overly ambitious megaproject. Yet, despite its shortcomings, the project comes nowhere close to being the biggest fail of all time. Number 1. Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. Plans for the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository were first announced in 1987 to solve the problem of nuclear waste disposal. On paper, the repository seemed like the perfect solution as the tunnel complex was located 300 meters under Yucca Mountain away from the population. However, the government was met with significant resistance from Congress and the general public alike. Many believed that the disposal site would contaminate a nearby water source, yet despite the backlash, the project ended up approved in 2002, only to be shut down in 2010 as political and public opposition grew. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for more videos.